Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidt List. I'm your host, Kurt Schmidt, and I cannot wait to get started with today's show. And I know you're going to love it because I have got an amazing guest I guarantee you it's gonna at least if not change your life, it will start you on the path to changing your life. Uh, I want to introduce you to Dr. Taryn. We'll get there in just 1 second, but I have to do my promotion. The book, Little Book of Networking, is available now. It's on Amazon, so go and check it out when you get a chance. But let's jump in and meet Dr. Taryn. Dr. Taryn, how are you today?
I'm making it today. I mean, that's a tall order that we're going to be transforming people's lives or putting them on the path to transformation. So I am so excited to rise to this occasion. I hope it happens for everyone. And I'm having a moment today, which we can talk about.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. Well, tell me, we'll get into that. Tell me a little bit about the audience, what you do and who you do it for.
Sure. So I grew up in the world of human resources, of human capital, of leadership development, and so I made my way as a human capital management consultant. I was at Cigna as the head of global leadership development for a number of years, where I oversaw the advancement of our leaders across our offices in 86 countries. Then I was invited to go out to Nike full time and work as the head of executive leadership development and talent strategy, which was really exciting. My team and I got to oversee the mobility advancement assessment of our
Mm.
leaders, and I worked directly with the C-suite. So I tell you all of this not to really, impress you per se, but just to give you a bit of an understanding of where I've been in the corporate world. There's a lot of people out there that are really incredible coaches, keynote speakers, and yet what I want you as an audience to take away is that I have done this work inside of corporate roles for Fortune 20, Fortune 50 companies where
You've walked the walk.
um, I've walked the walk. I've worked directly with incredible leaders. And so that's where my, sort of schooling of leadership, comes from. And today I'm the number one international expert on resilience, mental health, and well-being. So what does that even mean? Great question. I'm so glad you asked. And what that means is we're all going to face challenge, change, and complexity in our lives, or the 3 C's, as I call them. It's not if, it's when. It's a mandatory part of what it means to be here as a human on this earth. And so, what resilience does is it gives us the tools and the skill set to know in those inevitable moments when we're asking ourselves out loud or in our own minds, what am I going to do? It gives us the skill set to know what to do and the blueprint to be able to create a more positive and productive outcome.
That's amazing. Yeah, because I've listened, I've researched some of your work, and I realize that some people automatically think resilience is resilience, right? It's like resilience is being resilient, right? Versus like you had mentioned, it's kind of it's a process. It's not a state of being, right?
That's right. One of the reasons initially that I think I was really drawn to resilience is because I couldn't figure out what the heck it meant. It was like a circular definition. I looked up resilience and it was like to be resilient, and resilient was to demonstrate resilience. And I was like, this seems like an important topic, but nobody can tell me what it means or how we identify it. It seems to mean different things to different people. And yet it also seems to be so incredibly core and profound relative to our own development in leadership and in our personal lives. And so part of my interest, part of the reason I was drawn to it was like, I just wanted to know what it was.
Yeah, well, and I think as you mentioned, the work you've done is been even more. It just keeps increasingly becoming more important with the way the world works, with pandemics and goofy elections and wars and all these things. There's so many things that affect us in the world more so now because it's brought right to our doorstep with our phones and the internet and all those things. And there's almost this resilience that is inherent that people need to have. So I that's where I want to ask you. Um, to be human is to be resilient, right? It's like you are resilient whether you think you are or not. But is there like levels? Is it like of resiliency? How do you measure resiliency, either in yourself or in the work you do? Is there a measurement or is there levels? I'm just curious.
It's a super great question, and I love the question. One of the exciting things about this work that I've done around the 5 practices of highly resilient people, and my book is by the same title, The 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People, is to flip the script on how we talk about resilience. So,
Okay.
20 years interviewing hundreds of people, collecting thousands of pieces of data, what I have found is that there is no single human being who is not resilient. We are resilient, and resilience is the essence of what it means to be human. It's fundamentally and forever tied to what it means to be human.
Mm,
And how do I know that? Because you and every one of our listeners, we have looked in the face rejection, disappointment, loss, pain, job loss, the loss of a loved one, a health crisis, a diagnosis that was unexpected, a car accident, and we didn't know it was coming, and we had no skills, no prior training to be able to deal with this moment. And yet we looked at that and we said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And we figured it out. We figured it out. Why? Because it's part of our DNA as humans. And what's incredibly powerful about this is we get to stop being worried if we're resilient or resilient enough and just know that it's tied to our humanity. And then, sure, we're all on a continuum of resilience. Some of us have
yeah.
acquired more skills and practices than others. And it's absolutely something that we can invest in, over time. And I think what happens is resilience for me is really the difference maker. People say that, if you could acquire one skill in leadership in life, what would it be? Would it be being a good listener? Would it be, results driven? Would it be having a strategic mindset? I think all of those are incredibly important, but none of it works without resilience. And I know that your audience, Kurt, we're primarily talking to women, and we're talking to women who have careers and women who have, some women who have careers and are also balancing a family or caregiving or a partnership and other
Yeah.
types of responsibilities. And so, I think we've been talking for a long time about the fact that, like, we as women, the majority of us do not apply for a position unless we meet, 100% or nearly 100% of the
Very common.
criteria,
Yeah.
right? But that's not 100% of women,
No.
right? So I'm one of the women. I'll look at a job description and be like, 45%, okay, I got it. 60%, I can learn on the job. And I started to think, what makes me different from the majority of other women that feel like we need to be
Mm,
100%
hmm.
that
Hmm.
criteria for that job? And what it is that I have faced some pretty significant trauma as a young woman. I had a stalker when I was in high school. He tried to break into our home several times. When I went away to college, he unfortunately sexually assaulted and attacked another woman in our neighborhood. I developed 2 decades of PTSD as a result of this experience. And I also grew up with undiagnosed, dyslexia, and was finally diagnosed at the helpful age of 37 after I'd already completed already all of my schooling, right? Information that would have been useful 3 decades before. But my point is, because I effectively showed up in my life for those challenges, I look at a job description and I'm like, I can figure that out because I figured out
Yeah.
trauma, because I figured out navigating a stalker, because I figured out dyslexia. And so, what resilience does is it expands the aperture of what we know we are capable of. And it allows us to have a deep sense of faith in ourselves and in our worthiness to weather some of our most difficult moments. And so, what that does for women and for advancement is it says, hey, more of us can apply for jobs that we're not 100% qualified for. Why? Because I can respect that I have weathered these incredibly difficult storms in my life. And so, a job description doesn't scare me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about the workplace piece because you touch on it there a little bit. Because I'm wondering because there's people that might be listening to the show and, because of like the whole work from home thing that's going on right now and the fight against it or with it or for it or people being wishy-washy, and companies being wishy-washy and not, and some enforcing it, some sort of hinting at it and saying you won't get promoted unless you're in the office. Um, there's this, how do I know what are some of the signs where I'm having false resilience maybe? Maybe I'm just putting up with things versus actually like being resilient. Do you know where I'm going with that?
I have no idea.
Okay, so in my mind, there's that fake it till we make it sort of side of things, right? Where if I just push through these hard times and get to the other side, everything's going to be better. Now, in your mind, in your research, is there a difference between faking resilience and having just inherent resilience?
Yeah. So I am not a proponent of the fake it till you make it.
Oh, good. Tell me more about that.
So I believe that I mean, it's a catchy phrase. Don't get me
Sure is.
wrong. Who doesn't love a
People
good
love it.
rhyme now and then, right? But what fake it till you make it does is it propagates imposter syndrome.
Mm,
And it tells people to pretend to be something you're not or you don't think you are yet, and to put on a veneer as though you are.
mm.
And so if we're constantly faking it until we think we've made it, we never make it. There's
Right.
always a next limit. There's always a next horizon. There's always a next opportunity. And so what that means is we just sign up for this experience of constantly feeling like we're faking it until we get to the other side of making it, which is that ever moving,
Right. You never
sort of
actually make it. I've never met anybody who said they faked it till they make it that thinks they made it, I guess.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was doing this interview with this beautiful group called the Outlier Project, and the
Mm.
last question the guy asked me, he said, "Taryn, when did you know you were an outlier? Like kind of special and different than others?" And I was like, "I don't know. Um, now, never.
When you brought
Like
it up?
it just didn't occur to me. Like, I'm doing something that I love and that I'm deeply passionate about." And I don't see myself as being, on some dramatically different part of this scatter
Yeah,
plot, than somebody else. So I'm not
makes
a
sense.
proponent of fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
What I am a proponent of is casting a vision for who you want to become and what you want your life to look like, down to the most granular details of what does that smell like? What does that sound like? What does that taste like? How are you investing your time? Who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with? How does that feel? Right? So getting a really clear sense of like what is that vision that you are building in your life? And then, you know, with this idea of like starting with the end in mind with that vision,
Yep.
then we get back into that and say, okay, given that I've crystallized this vision, who do I get to be today in order to receive this vision, in order to actualize who I want to become to create my life for tomorrow? And so that goes all the way down to how do I speak to other people? How do I order a coffee at the coffee shop or at Starbucks? How do I speak to the clerk at the checkout counter? How do I invest my time? What are the types of relationships, that I have? And we start doing that today. And that is real. And we take steps, tangible steps, real steps to become the person that we get to be and need to be in order then to actualize the vision for ourselves for the future.
Yeah. Well, in that mindset, then, do you view resilience almost like as a muscle or something like something you are? almost physically, in a way, manifesting and building over time. And I'm guessing, just like the fake it to make it, like there's no like peak of resiliency, right? It's an ongoing process, right?
Yeah, I see our dreams, our desires, our achievements, our aspirations, the success that we want to create. I see that as being the fuel, and I see resilience as being the vehicle.
Mm,
Resilience is the skill set that gets us there because on that road toward our vision, and that vision is going to shift and change and evolve over time. But as we continue on that road toward our vision, toward what we want to create, you know, what we're envisioning, that is the gas in the tank, that is the fuel. And then resilience is the vehicle that gets us there. So it is
got
the
it.
practice of facing the challenges that will inevitably come up on that journey. Will we hit a pothole? We absolutely will. Will there be detours? Of course. Is there going to be traffic? Absolutely. Will we get lost on our way? For sure. So it's those practices that help sustain us and nurture us on that road that allows us to get to the vision or the goal that we're imagining.
And that's the other thing I want to ask you about is, how important have you found the words that I choose, as part of this journey, to help with this, right? Because there's ways, right? Like, I've taught myself a long time ago to stop saying these are a bunch of problems, but no, these are opportunities, right? And trying to have a better approach towards things. So I notice you use words specifically like challenge, for example, versus like a hardship or a problem or something like that. Do words? I mean, words matter, but do words matter in your mind, in the research you've done and the way that you coach people through this?
1600%.
Okay.
1600%. The brain is a funny organ.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
a fun thing. And so just try this on for size. There is research that demonstrates that when we smile, regardless of our mood, when we smile, I'm smiling now. huh? When we smile, that's kind of like a creepy smile, like a Joker
Ah,
smile. Batman, for those of you that are watching. But when we smile, the muscles in our face that are connected to the neurons in our brain sends the message that we are happy.
mhm.
So if we want to change our emotional state, if we're walking into a room where we're going to be networking and meeting new people, and that strikes a chord of social anxiety for you, as it does for me, I smile every time I walk in the room because that's going to send the signal to my brain that, like, okay, like, I guess she's happy. I guess she likes this, networking torture
Yeah.
stuff that
Let's
she's
send some
chosen.
serotonin our way.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
So the brain's a funny thing. So if you just move your facial muscles in different ways, that creates an emotional experience
Yeah.
in your body. So you better believe the words that come out of your mouth and the words that you think in your mind, they are no different because you hear them both, whether it's in your head or whether it's spoken out loud, the words matter.
Yeah. They do. And I want to talk about that because it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that if I'm in an environment where at work, or mostly at work, but if I'm in an environment, because I like to talk about that versus like family or things like that, because we get to choose work. We don't get to choose family. Um, uh, with work, there can be times where it feels like you're in a negative atmosphere or a toxic atmosphere, and you've got to make the decision: is this something I'm going to push through and be resilient, and stick it out because I need this job, and I need to be this I need to be this person. I need this job. Job market's crap, whatever. I don't know. I have golden handcuffs on. Um, and that's why I keep going back to this idea of this false flag of resilience. Is there in your mind, um, you know, how do you take stock of that resilience? Because one of the things that I personally have struggled with with the idea of resilience is the idea of real time resilience, like feeling it and accepting it in real time versus something that I reflect on months later, years later, or something like, oh, I was really resilient back then. I must have been. I just said a lot of word salad to you. I just want to get your response to any of that.
It's a delicious word salad that you have prepared
Thank you.
for us, and there is a lot to unpack there. At least 3 things that emerge for me that I'd love to address. So, one is choice, and choice specifically inside of relationships.
Yeah,
One is about, you know, quote unquote toxic environments,
yeah.
or what we do when our environment is not aligned. Then
The
what
real
was the
time resilience.
and then the real time resilience. Okay, so we got a lot to talk about here.
Yes,
All right.
please.
So the first thing is choice. This also dovetails into our conversation about words. We've all said at some point or another, and we've certainly heard people say, well, I did it because I didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
You know. And what message does that signal to our brain and to the people that are hearing us? It signals helplessness. It signals victimhood. And the reality is we have a choice. Even if the choices aren't good, we have a choice. In fact, we're not going to go down the road of privilege today, but privilege is about having better choices.
sure.
Privilege is about having better opportunities. And so when we are in a position where we don't feel like our choices are good, we are not in a place of privilege, and yet we are still making a choice. We're
Right.
still making a choice, and we get to own that choice, and we get to be accountable to that choice. And so when it comes to family, you know, if you're depending on your spiritual leanings, there are religions and spiritual practices that do believe that we chose our parents in a
Sure.
spiritual
Sure.
realm, you know? And, we talk about our biological families, or the families that we're born into, or the families that we were adopted by, right? So our family of origin. And then what we have as we get older is we have an opportunity to create a family of choice. And so we do have a choice about our family. We then choose the families that we want to create. In fact, I was sitting at the dinner table last night with my family, my partner, my fiance, and my 2 sons who are 12 and 9. And I looked at my fiance and I said, this is exactly the family that I always wanted and I wanted to create. So you bet I chose this family.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, and so back to that choice, and the next thing we talked about is now I'm in a
Toxic.
toxic environment, right? And
Super
I
toxic.
have, yeah, and I feel stuck. Um, and like you said, I've got choices to make, but how do I know if I'm not just having a pity party for myself and I'm like, woe is me, and I'll just get over it, Dr. Karen. It'll be fine. I'll just push through. And the boss was just in a bad mood today. That's why they acted up. And I'm going to be resilient and push through on that. But then all of a sudden, 12 years later, you're still there.
Yeah. I mean, again, like a lot to unpack there, So what I feel called to say in this moment is that what we tolerate continues.
That's good.
Now, that assumes a certain level of power, like children who are in a relationship with a caregiver or a parent and they keep going back to that household. Well, they're not tolerating, they just don't have as much agency as an
Sure.
adult, 18 or older. What we tolerate continues. So we teach people how to treat us based on what we're willing to tolerate,
Mm.
what we
Hmm.
allow into our sphere. And as soon as you change the dynamic, as soon as you draw a boundary, as soon as you're clear about the behavior that you're not going to tolerate, people will test those boundaries right away. It's like going on a diet and saying you're going to eat healthy. And the first thing that you want to do is stuff 5 donuts in your mouth. It's the exact same thing, right? Like as soon as we draw a boundary, the universe and people in our lives are going to come and challenge that boundary. And they want to know how serious
Yeah.
we are about it, you know?
I do that with my wife a lot with Chinese food a lot, during the
Mhm.
week. I'm like, "We should get Chinese food." She's like, "Don't suggest that to me.
Mm.
It's bad. We can't we but you want it. I know you."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and, like, this is a whole other conversation too about food and
Oh,
body
yeah.
image and, like, all the things, right? And so, um, you know,
Like
I don't believe that our food choices are a moral issue. And this
mhm.
goes back to the words that we use. So I don't talk about food as good and bad. I don't talk about my behavior relative to eating as good and bad. I don't even talk about like a cheat meal. Like what? So like I ate something that like wasn't on the list and now I'm a
Right.
cheater. Now it's like it has like a moral reflection of my character because I had a
Yeah,
donut or I had a
it's a
burger,
negative and
you know?
it's a negative, right?
And in some states, you can get a donut in a hamburger, so I don't know what that means for your moral
That's
character
true.
and goodness, right? So I've gotten away from all of that, and I grew up in a household where I saw role models who were carrying out not an eating disorder, but disordered eating, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Restriction, self-flagellation, extreme exercise in order to
Yeah.
burn off calories from food, and I said, "I don't wanna do that."
No,
Like,
no.
that does not seem like a thing that I wanna do. So, I wouldn't call it I wanna dovetail this into your question. I wouldn't call that in particular like a toxic environment, right?
Yeah,
But what I would say is relative to, like, tying together the words that we use, the environment that we're in, what I did note was what I saw people doing around me, I did not wanna keep doing,
right.
you know? And so when I had the agency to be able to make a different choice, I did. And people say all the time, again, I'm gonna say a food thing, it's like, um, oh, look, you can eat this and you don't have to feel guilty
Yep.
about it, right? And I'm like, I wasn't gonna feel guilty, actually. I find that guilt really, is detrimental to the taste of food. Like, it just like if I'm feeling bad about the thing I'm eating
Yeah,
while I'm eating, it just like doesn't taste as good. So
yeah.
we are in choice. And this is a hard pill to swallow. Everything in our lives we have chosen. Everything in our lives we have chosen. Like I have a cat that keeps coming up in my lap. I chose to have this cat.
Yep,
I chose the partner that I have. I chose where I live. I
yep.
made a decision as an adult. And so
I
if
remember you
there are
had a
things,
Andy Warhol quote, in one of your shows. It was something
Mhm.
about, time changes things, but we make the change or something.
Yeah, when we think about healing from difficult things, we often say, time heals all wounds. And the message that
Sure.
sends to
Yeah,
us humans is that,
yeah.
well, great, we'll just pop in some Netflix here and some time will pass and then I'll feel better. And
We'll
that's
self-medicate with
true.
Netflix.
That is true.
Yeah,
And if we really want to change things, as Andy Warhol would say, we have to change them ourselves. We take
yeah,
responsibility. We recognize that we are in choice. We connect with the fact that everything in our lives, we chose. And if we don't like it, we make a change. If we don't
right.
like how someone is treating us, we make a change. And by the way, you said something really important. Resilience should never be used as an excuse to explain away someone's bad behavior. Resilience should never be used to tolerate being treated less than what you are worth.
Yeah,
Resilience should never be a reason for you to endure detrimental experiences, to be in a detrimental or abusive relationship. Now, does it require tremendous resilience to be in an abusive relationship? You bet. I've been
yeah,
in an abusive relationship. I've been in a couple, and whoa, was I tapping into my stores of resilience.
right.
And then also got to look around in those relationships and say a threshold had been crossed. First, it was
Yeah,
a threshold of psychological safety. And that felt confusing to me because I didn't know what to do. And then when a threshold of physical safety was crossed, while that was frightening, it also provided tremendous clarity because I knew what to do
Yeah.
next. Do I wish that when we felt when I felt, I'll speak for myself, do I wish that when I felt psychologically unsafe in a relationship or when other people feel psychologically unsafe, that that would feel robust enough to make a change and to leave that relationship? I know for some people it does, and I admire that. But I think for the vast majority of people, myself included, feels a little flimsy to walk around and be like, well, I feel psychologically unsafe. And I feel like people will be like, and, you know? And but yet that is profoundly important. It's profoundly important in your romantic relationship, in your family relationships, in your place of work.
Yeah.
And we
That's
get to
amazing.
listen. We get to listen to that. And so the other piece
Right.
of this is resilience should never be used as a reason to not address our feelings and our experience. Resilience has for so long been used to say, well, just what's that expression? Like keep your nose to the grindstone,
Yeah. Put
you
up or shut
know?
up or yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I speak with, when I connect with Fortune 500 organizations and they're going to have me come speak to their employee population on resilience, they say to me, you are not going to tell our people to just, keep going, tough it out,
Yeah.
keep grinding because that's not what people need to hear. And it's not what people need to hear. And it's not what resilience is.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten too much into the practical and tactical elements of what resilience is, right? But we've got the 5 practices of highly resilient people, and those are very well defined, in my book, on my website, on Instagram, all the places you can find me. And so the first practice of resilience is the practice of vulnerability. And what is vulnerability? It's connecting with ourselves.
Yeah.
It's knowing what our internal experience, what our thoughts, feelings, and experience is, and allowing it, based on the environment that we're in, and if it's at a place of work, like sort of what our culture would dictate. It's about, to the greatest extent possible, being able to find a connection and even a congruence between the thoughts, feelings, and experience that we have on the inside and then what we're sharing and showing people on the outside. And so it's not about just pushing through, pushing things down.
Right.
It's about being deeply with ourselves and being vulnerable enough to connect with our emotional experience and then to authentically share that experience with others.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense because from everything that I've, the research I've done and some of the work you've done, I mean, a lot of it stems from this idea of like, well, we can't be resilient till, we understand um, where we're starting from, right? Like that place of vulnerability and being able to then become resilient and transform it. And that
Yeah.
dovetails really good into my last question, which is
Okay,
the
but I'm going to
this
say real
idea.
quick before your last question,
Yeah.
because we're talking about language here.
Oh, please.
Do you see how you said, and I'm just going to use this as an example for our listeners, if you don't
Yeah,
mind,
please.
how we say something to the effect of, we say to ourselves, we can't be resilient until blah, blah, blah. Right? I mean, that is like such a loaded statement that so many of us are saying to ourselves all the time,
Mm,
right? It's I can't be resilient until, which means I'm not resilient today. And we know, Kurt, me and you, that we have debunked that myth. We
we
know
did. We
now, and
started with that.
everybody listening, that resilience is the essence of being human. It is tied to our humanity. We can't not be resilient.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I'm not going to be resilient, until it's like, no, it's already there. Already there. It already exists within us. Last word thing. There's a word called sillience. It's like
Oh, yeah.
silence with like an extra I.
Mm,
If people look it up, it means to uncover within ourselves strengths, abilities, capabilities, kind of a treasure trove of things that exist within us, either that we have forgotten about or that we didn't know was there. And so if you
yeah.
understand the word sillience in the English language, then you hear resilient and you're like,
Hmm.
Oh, I get it. When I face the challenge, change, and complexity, it's there to remind me of the capabilities that I either forgot about or didn't know were there, but they were there the whole time.
Yep, they were there the whole time. But that's the last question, which is what we talked about, which is the idea of real time resilience, like being able to feel resilient in the moment, um, versus just it being a reflective act, right? And
Yeah,
and
I,
I
I
just want to
love
get
that.
your take on how you approach that.
Yeah, it's great. I've got a great example to share with you. So I think we often don't feel good about being resilient in the moment, not because resilience doesn't necessarily feel good, but I think it's hard to like feel good when we're in a moment of
Mm-hmm.
challenge, change, and complexity. And so what I like to share with people is when you're in that moment and you're demonstrating resilience, you may not necessarily feel good. You probably won't feel good, you know, and that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you're working through a significant time in your life where you're facing something important and meaningful and difficult, you
Yeah,
know? And there's also ways in my life where I've learned how to respond rather than react, right? Moments where it is real time resilience and I can say to myself, you know what, girlfriend? You just nailed that just now, right? And here's the example from last night. So, my family and I have two sons, as I mentioned. We live outside of Philadelphia. Um, if there isn't any traffic, it takes about 30 minutes to get into the city. And sometimes when the weather's not good, when it's raining, when it's rush hour, it can take 90 minutes. So I have a caregiver that I've hired. I've had her for about 2 years who helps me with the driving because the kids go to school in Philadelphia, even though we live in a suburb. I moved out to the suburbs um, during COVID. And so the kids are still in the same school. And so our caregiver was supposed to pick them up last night. I get a call from the kids a couple minutes after 4 saying she is not there. They have no
uh-oh,
idea where she is. It's raining outside. It's starting to get dark.
that's
Okay,
freaky.
great. Yeah. I was just about to like get a workout in or like knock out like some work. I was really excited about it. And now I'm going to be getting in the car. And not to mention, I don't know where she is. So we figured out where the kids were going to go. And so I get in the car and I drive 90 minutes into the city because it's raining in rush hour to pick up the kids. I get to the meeting point. I can't find them. I walk around for 45 minutes. I finally find them, you know. And like this is a parent thing. Like we're like super, super worried, like, oh, please, like God, just like let me find my kids, right? And then you
Yeah,
find them, and it's like this like immediate rebound effect where we just want to like tear somebody's head off,
yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah.
You know, you're like,
I know that
please
feeling.
let my
Yes.
children be okay. I'll do anything. And then like as soon as I find them, the tendency for me inside is to like be like, what happened? Like, and just
What's going on?
unload all of that
All that tension, right?
sort of pent up fear, right? So
Yeah,
so my cute little son comes around the corner and I see him and I know about this tendency for me and for us as parents and for us as people to sort of have that rebound effect of emotion. So I was like, "Hi, where have you guys been? I've been looking for you for 45 minutes." You know? So I get them in the car, we drive home. Now it's been a 3.5 hour endeavor. And I'm making dinner and I'm getting the lunches ready for today. And I say to my oldest son, "Hey, could you get your lunchbox out so I can get your lunch ready?" And he says, "Oh, I don't know where that is. I think I might have lost it." Right. And so this is also a thing that happens for us psychologically in life. Like sometimes we don't really react to the big things like the caregiver's not here. I just drove 3.5 hours. I couldn't like I sort
right.
of like you can edit this out if it's not good. Like I've held my shit together,
No, it's
to
good.
the extent that I could.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now, but but now I've had all these straws piled on my back as a camel. And the
yeah.
lunchbox, just like the
You
lunchbox
toppled
might be the
everything
thing
over.
that right? It's the last rung in the Jenga before it all hits the floor. And I know that, right? And so, despite the fact that I want to unload about the lost lunchbox, which really does not mean anything in the grand scheme of anything, I take a breath and I look at my sweet son who's getting straight A's and like tries so hard as the oldest child to be perfect, which I totally get because I was the, card carrying perfect oldest child. And I
Hmm.
said, "That's okay, honey. Can you look for that tomorrow in school?" You know, but it's that breath, it's that in the moment, like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a choice about how I'm gonna show up here, and I'm gonna
Hmm.
save this kid a lot of time and money in therapy.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
like, when he
Right.
gets older, he's like, "It was perfect, and I got straight A's," and then it's just like I just lost the lunch, but it's just the what and
The lunchbox incident. Yeah.
I never get a break and, I do everything
Yeah.
right and, are always picking
Mm.
at the whatever, however that gets coded
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
his brain,
Yeah.
what his childhood experiences. So I just looked at him and I said, with a smile, I said, after the night, I've had, it's really tempting to want to just unload about the lunchbox. But you know what?
Yep.
I'm not going to do that. And I just saved you a lot of time and money in therapy when you get older.
Yeah.
So you're welcome.
Well, and this is what's amazing about this story. I mean, you literally have a career built on the idea of resilience, and people would think that, that you just walk around and you're just like an oak, constantly because you've come into your own with all the work you've done, and you're a pillar, that is unassailable when it comes to these sorts of things, right? But it affects everybody.
Yeah, well, and resilience isn't about being an oak and it's not about being unassailable. You
Yeah,
know, we so often talk about bouncing, like going back to a prior and we just know that's not true. Bouncing back is for a Rubbermaid container, you know.
it is.
Bouncing forward is for humans. Bouncing forward means we learn from our experiences and we are fundamentally and forever changed by them. Because if we don't allow ourselves to be changed, if we don't allow in the learning and the meaning of that experience, then we just go on without integrating, the sort of gifts of that challenge. And so resilience isn't about being Teflon and untouchable. Resilience is about acknowledging the moment of challenge, saying this sucks, saying I want to kill somebody right now. I mean, like, you don't really want to kill somebody, but like
Yeah,
emotionally, like, like I want to throw my computer through the window or like, wring somebody's neck or laugh or cry or do both at the same time. But I'm worried if
yep,
I do both at the same time that I might just seem crazy. So I probably shouldn't do that. And it's just recognizing that we feel that way in the moment and then saying like, okay, and I have some skills to be able to deal with this. Because even though it seems like a great idea to like unload on someone or throw my computer through the window, like it's probably not going to be a good idea, later
yeah,
on. So let me
yeah,
just like clean this up right now.
yeah. Well, I like that idea of and always kind of that mindset of, bouncing forward and never thinking like, oh, I need to bounce back from this, or well, I'll get better when I bounce back from this, or once I can bounce, and like you said, the words really matter. And if we focus on the idea of moving forward and keep moving forward and learning from those lessons, it just seems like you said, like you're going to feel happier and more control of the things that are happening to you on a daily basis that, like you said, can't control.
Yeah, I mean, you may not feel happier, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not doing it right. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't necessarily feel happier when I like took a deep breath and was like, okay, don't yell at your perfect straight A son about losing his lunchbox because you're pissed off about all the
You weren't
time and
there
energy
wasn't a proud
and
moment for you?
activity and workout you lost,
Sure.
you know. But what it did mean is I felt grounded in the fact that I was making a decision about my behavior that I knew I would be proud of later.
I get it. I love it. All right, Dr.
So,
Taryn, I could talk to you all day. I
mm,
first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day, and sticking it through with me. If I want to know more about the work you do, if I want to get your book, where do I go and find all this information?
yeah, absolutely. The book is called The Five Practices, the number fives, the five practices of highly resilient people. That's available on this little website that you might have heard of called Amazon. Just kidding. No, I'm not kidding about it being available on Amazon. It is available on Amazon and Audible and all the places where you get your books. I've got a podcast called Flourish or Bold Stories of Resilience, where well-known people share their lesser well-known stories of how they faced challenge and got on, big stages, you know, big screens, big fields as athletes. And that's really important for the behind the scenes challenge. And then, I'd invite you to, come join me on Instagram. Come check out what we're doing. I'm sure that's in the show notes, Dr. Taryn Marie, and we give away a lot of free content, have great conversations, and so I'm just so excited to connect with your listeners and hear about this show. And Kurt, thank you so much for having me. I love your
Oh, yes.
podcast, the work that you're doing in the world, and how you're speaking into your listeners' lives in profoundly meaningful ways. And it's just an honor and a delight to be here with you.
Oh, you're too kind, Dr. Taryn. You're too kind. Again, like I just want to say, I highly recommend people go and check out the work that Dr. Taryn's doing. It's really fantastic. I'm a big fan of the work you do, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. Thank you for joining me on my therapy session with Dr. Taryn. I myself have grown uh, a lot in the last 35 minutes. So I appreciate you, and take some time for yourself this week. All right. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. Okay. Let some other people carry for a little while. You can always pick it up later. All right. We'll see you next time.